Hello, my name is Sonia Grine. I am reading Becoming Who You Are by Dutch Sheets. We are on chapter 12, which is page 153. You deserve a break today. I've been busy before, really busy. You've undoubtedly been there also. But I hope you've never gone to the hectic extremes I did during one not too distant season in my life. Allow me to explain. From 2003 to 2004, my good friend Chuck Pierce and I embarked on a prayer tour of all 50 states in a year. This wasn't a series of on-offs in which we flew into town, muttered a few prayers, and left that night or the following morning. God had challenged us with specific assignments for each state, which meant that more often than not, we would be at multiple sites in a state throughout the week, conducting services, leading prayer gatherings, teaching, making prophetic declarations, serving the local bodies, an assortment that required much energy, as did the grueling travel. Meanwhile, I was still serving as pastor of our congregation in Colorado Springs and would fly back every Sunday to preach and minister there. Page 154. As any pastor can tell you, pastoring demands more than your average 8-to-5 job. Combine those daily responsibilities with my travel schedule and the calling God was increasing in my life to intercede for our nation's government and leaders, a calling that frequently entails strategic trips to Washington, D.C. After a single year, I'd made more than 70 out-of-state trips, an average of almost 1.5 per week. In the midst of all this, I was also writing books, mentoring leaders, launching nationwide prayer networks, meeting the needs of my family, which are more emotional than anything else, given my frequent absence, and of course, making sure my time with the Lord wasn't getting elbowed out. When it was all said and done, I was spent, literally spent. Doctors discovered that my adrenals were partially burnt out and that I was existing on a next to nothing energy supply. I would often sleep for 10 or more hours and still wake up over fatigued. Often, it would take me most of the morning for my mind to shake off the grogginess and begin functioning normally. To restore my adrenal levels, I took a prescribed combination of vitamins and supplements, in addition to exercising and naturally resting, not an overnight remedy. I needed an extended break from life. There is rarely a time when any of us wouldn't like a break, no matter how extensive. We live at breakneck speed that only stops temporarily during the few moments our phones, PDAs, or laptops are off. It doesn't help that whatever free time remains is usually filled with more noise, TV, iPod, the list continues. With our pace, it's become a necessity to take some time off now and then. Yet there's a big difference in wanting a vacation from everyday life and needing a soul rest. As we've learned ever since the fall, our soul has been in a state of chaos because our decision to elevate our own knowledge over God's. We have lacked the inherent peace with which He originally made our soul to exist. In other words, for thousands of years, we've now been in distress rather than His rest. Christ came to change all that by taking the soul to the cross, where He becomes its Lord again. The result, as we'll see, is soul rest. In Matthew 11:28-29, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your souls." Safe to say, we all qualify for this maxed out club, and if we come to our Messiah, He promises rest, a respite, a break, a much needed breather. More crazy talk. Once again, however, Jesus couches His offer in paradoxical terms. Want rest? Good, then take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light, Matthew 11:29-30. It's another of those moments. A yoke is a hard wooden crosspiece draped around the neck of an ox or horse and used to plow a field. It puts the animal pulling it in total submission to a master's direction. The spiritual correlation is blatant. A yoke is anything but light, easy, or freeing. It's cumbersome, annoying, and distressing. And Jesus offers us the vacation of a lifetime for our souls if we'll only put on one of these wonderful restrictive contraceptions. There he goes again. There's a word in his statement, however, that illuminates the entire offer. Trestos. Virtually every version renders this easy, and translators certainly aren't wrong for doing so, but because of the limitations of this English word, we're missing out on the original deeper meaning. Let me explain. Page 156. Imagine you're a construction worker contracted to build a giant new bank downtown. According to the blueprints, this building will dwarf all others around it. Your assignment for the next few weeks is to frame the structure with steel I-beams, a key task that must be done without error. Today, your foreman has instructed you to secure the massive bolts on those beams. One problem, though, he hasn't given you any tools. Apparently, you're expected to tighten the connective bolts using only your hands. Sounds ludicrous. If the public knew that's how I-beams were fastened by hand, no one would set foot in this grandiose edifice. In fact, the whole place would probably collapse before you reach the next phase of construction. What was needed for the task was the right tool, a large adjustable wrench, or in most cases a machine built specifically for tightening and securing bolts. With one of those, you could successfully accomplish the assignment because you would have what was necessary. When Jesus describes his yoke as easy, trestos, he is saying that it is that which is necessary. The root word means to furnish what is needed. Easy defines this term because that which is difficult becomes easy when one is given what is necessary or needed. In this verse, what is his yoke necessary for? Soul rest. Our soul requires a special tool to be loosened and given rest. Our soul needs an adjustment that only Jesus can provide, and it comes through bearing his yoke. Interestingly enough, the word for taking this yoke upon us is ero, which means exalt. It's the same word Jesus used in instructing us to take up our cross, Matthew 16:24-26. Our choice is obvious. Either exalt our soul or choose to lift up Jesus' lordship, take his yoke, and proclaim death upon our soulish nature. Either cling to the sinful yoke of our Adamic nature or bear the ultimately freeing yoke he offers. You can learn a lot from an ox. Even after acknowledging the situation on these terms, it is astonishing how many people still want to follow their own scheme, like the arrogant ship captain. We'll do anything to prove our way is better than God's. The captain looked into the dark night and saw faint lights in the distance. Immediately he told his signalman to send a message, alter your course 10 degrees south. Promptly, a return message was received, alter your course 10 degrees north. The captain was angered. His command had been ignored, so he sent a second message, alter your course 10 degrees south, I am the captain. Soon another message was received, alter your course 10 degrees north, I am Seaman Third Class Jones. Immediately the captain sent a third message, knowing the fear it would invoke, alter your course 10 degrees south, I am a battleship. Then the reply came, alter your course 10 degrees north, I am a lighthouse. Stubbornness comes in countless prideful forms. It seems we'd rather do anything but concede our self-proclaimed position as top dog. As a result, we try to define our own way of finding rest for our soul via money, fame, success, sex, religion, or various other man-made solutions. Page 158. We remain stiff-necked, which in fact is a term that originated from the concept of being yoked. The Hebrew word gave the little description for an ox that refused to pull the plow, with a heavy restrictive structure on its neck, and a farmer pulling it in various directions. An ox would sometimes rebel and fight the yoke by stiffening its neck. The Old Testament mentions this term on several occasions, example Deuteronomy 10:16, 31:27, Psalm 75:5, yet it's in Jeremiah 17:23 where we find a perfect take on those who refuse the rest that Christ offers. Yet they did not listen or incline their ears, but they stiffened their necks in order not to listen or take correction. That would be soul. I see people react like this all the time. Say one thing from the pulpit that crosses the soul, pun intended, and you'll notice that certain folks literally stiffen up. Talk about tithing one too many times. Mention forgiving past offenders just a little too often. Have the music too loud, the sermon too long, or the prayers too passionate. You've rattled some theological cages and crossed their church boundaries, and you can be sure they're going to let you know. I've been in situations where I thought that as a spiritual leader, I needed to step in and prayerfully say something about the way someone was treating his wife or children. Some, rather than receiving my words as nudges from the Lord, have responded with a "how dare you" look. Why? Because I have offended their soul, which made them even more stiff-necked. They wouldn't take the yoke. By its nature, no soul likes to be held in check, corrected, or rebuked, and so it does the logical thing. By man's logic, that is. It whines, pouts, kicks, screams, throws a tantrum, gives the silent treatment, takes it up with the board of elders, stops tithing, leaves the church altogether. You get my point. The soul gets squirmy when its turf is trodden upon. Would you please stop crying? We have a choice not to respond this way. There's an alternative that leads to true rest rather than ruffled feathers. Whether you feel like it or not, you can yield to the direction in which your soul's true master, Jesus, is pulling. He wants your soul to be at rest. He wants it to be, as Psalm 131 says, like a weaned child. Read how David brought rest to his soul. O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor my eyes haughty, nor do I involve myself in great matters or in things too difficult for me. Surely I have composed and quieted my soul like a weaned child rests against its mother. My soul is like a weaned child within me. David contrasts an arrogant soul that takes on assignments beyond its true ability to one that is weaned, quiet, and restful. We are weaned from something when we've reached a certain level of maturity. The Hebrew word for weaned, gamald, actually means ripe and refers to when a fruit is ready to be plucked from the branch. At that point, it's ready to move on and serve its purpose. Likewise, a weaned child is one who doesn't need her mother's milk anymore. Contrast this with an unweaned child screaming to be fed by mama when mama isn't available. The former is composed and quiet, the latter is uncontrolled and demanding. I will never forget the first time Cece left me alone with our firstborn, Sarah, who was being breastfed at the time. Don't worry, sweetie, I'll be back in time to feed her, Cece said. Nothing to worry about, right? Wrong. I can't remember if Cece was late returning or if Sarah's timing was a little off, but the reason didn't matter once my precious 4-month-old woke up and realized she was hungry. Page 160. In fact, judging by the way she cried, she was way beyond famished. I mean, if she didn't get a meal within the next 2 minutes, she was surely going to die. Isn't this how all babies think? I tried reasoning, baby girl, I'm sorry I don't have what mommy has, but she's on her way home right now. If you'll just hold on a bit. Didn't work. I tried faking her out by continuously putting a pacifier in her mouth and holding her close, as she would be if she were eating. Not a chance. And, of course, as any dad has done, I tried the old rock her till she's too dizzy to cry move. I ended up nauseated. After what seemed like hours, Cece walked in. Within 2 seconds after she began to feed, Sarah was content as well as a suckling baby. Several months later, home alone with my weaned daughter, it was a night and day difference. When Sarah became hungry, rather than a nuclear meltdown deserving of Oscar recognition, she ate from another source, and Mommy came home to a peaceful dad and child. We can react either way to Christ's offer of rest. Whine, cry, and scream about wanting our way, or settle down, take his yoke, and know that he'll come through with his promise. We can't listen to rampaging souls. I want what I want, and I want it now. I don't care what anyone thinks. I've been wronged. I deserve this. I'm going to get my way no matter what you say, God. Or we can keep soul under control by bringing it to the cross and taking on the yoke of Jesus. Only the latter yields a rested, ripened, matured, and weaned soul that trusts in its Lord completely. All else leads to discontent. Free to grow. Let's take a look at some biblical examples of souls that took the way to the Lord's rest. We've already highlighted David's writing in Psalm 131. He makes statements elsewhere worth noting in regard to soul contentment. In 116:7 he writes, "Return to your rest, O my soul, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you." Dealt bountifully is the same Hebrew word translated weaned in Psalm 131, Gamal. Here again, it evokes the word picture of a ripened fruit. When you have dealt bountifully with the fruit, you've nourished its source with everything needed. You've done all you can to feed it properly. As a result, it will ripen and mature. The analogy remains true with a small child. If you feed him the way he needs to be fed, he will grow and mature to where he no longer relies solely on milk, but also desires solid food. He is rested in his maturity. In this verse, the process brings rest to our soul. In 142 verse 7, David says, Bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. Again, Gamal shows the Lord's faithful provision that leads to a maturing of the soul. Yet notice what David also says in the first part. Bring my soul out of prison, get my soul out of jail. Jesus went to the depths of hell to free our soul from the dungeon of our sinfulness. Without salvation, our soul is destined for a shackled, confined future. With it, it's bound for the freedom it was always intended to enjoy. Page 162. Charles Simpson in Pastoral Renewal writes, I met a young man not long ago who dives for exotic fish for aquariums. He said one of the most popular aquarium fish is the shark. He explained that if you catch a small shark and confine it, it will stay a size proportionate to the aquarium. Sharks can be 6 inches long, yet fully matured, but if you turn them loose in the ocean, they grow to their normal length of 8 feet. The soul, confined in the prison of our old nature, will never be able to experience the growth, maturity, and ultimately the rest Christ offers. However, when we take his yoke and allow him to establish true rest and freedom within us, our soul can develop to God's intended bountiful growth. You calling me a dumb sheep? Consider the beginnings of David's most well-known passage, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Verses 1 through 3. And the last part of verse 2, it can be translated literally. He leads me beside the waters of rest. How? The very next statement explains. By restoring our soul. Restoring is the word shuab, which means movement back to the point of departure. Restoring our soul, returning it to the point of departure, requires what Jesus spoke in Matthew 8:28 through 30. The Lord's yoke, his shepherdship, as pictured in this psalm, that is what we walked away from in Eden. You see this imagery through verses such as Isaiah 53:6. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. In 1 Peter 2:25, you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your soul. At the fall, through Adam, we all came out from under the Lord's shepherdship. We went our own way, deciding to exalt our own soul, our own knowledge above our master. Thank you very much, God, but I'll take it from here. I know you made all this around me, and you know the most intricate parts of me, but I'll tell you what, I think I can do better. I'll be my own Lord. I'll run my own life, if you don't mind. And ever since then, we've been running around like aimless sheep, trying to find peace for our soul. David's solution, and one we'd all do well to embrace, is to return to the point of departure. Return to the place where our soul wandered off like a lost dumb sheep. Where is that? It's at the lordship of Jesus. We all renounce God's authority when we deferred to our sinful nature. To find our way back to his promise of rest and restoration, we must return to the place of fully acknowledging him as master, and that exact place is found at, you guessed it, the cross of Christ, page 164. It's not just a coincidence that Psalm 23, a picture of a restored soul, follows Psalm 22, a picture of the cross. 3 of the 7 sayings of Christ on the cross he took from this psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Verse 1 is how it begins. The message is clear. We must go through the cross, Psalm 22, to find rest for our soul, Psalm 23. We must take his yoke and find everlasting freedom. I won't lie, it's not easy to change unless you take the yoke. Our soul is a raging beast that has been pampered in the wild for thousands of years. Every time we've sinned against God and exalted our desires above his, we fed this soulish animal. Yet Christ offers us all the same rest from the fallen soul. Take my yoke upon you, he says it paradoxically, and you will find rest for your souls. Nothing but glorious, for when we place the uncomfortable, ultra-restrictive yoke on our fallen soul, when we place our soul at the cross and recognize our Savior's lordship, transformation begins. Not just minor revelation, but lasting, permanent change that molds us more into the image of Jesus, whom we were meant to look like in the first place.